In today's show, Ben Shapiro begins by discussing the release of the Jeffrey Epstein papers, which reveal details about the notorious underage sex traffickers' connections to famous individuals such as Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. He then shifts to the 2024 election, highlighting Donald Trump's lead in the polls and Joe Biden's struggles. Shapiro points out that Biden's approval ratings are low, and he is resorting to a Trump-bashing tour to improve his standing. Shapiro emphasizes that Trump is leading in the polls, and Biden's approval rating is the lowest of any president going back to the 1940s. He notes that Biden's attempt to label Trump as a racist and a fascist is unlikely to work, as Trump's actions and policies are already well known to the public. Additionally, Shapiro questions whether Biden's strategy of bashing Trump will be effective in increasing Democratic turnout in the next election. Shapiro discusses the immigration crisis at the southern border, highlighting the record-high number of border encounters and the challenges faced by Customs and Border Protection. He criticizes the Biden administration for blaming Republicans for the crisis and refusing to enforce border laws. He points out that Democrats are also facing challenges related to illegal immigration in states like Texas, Arizona, Chicago, and New York. Shapiro also discusses the proposed Secure the Border Act of 2023, which includes conservative measures to address the border crisis, such as reestablishing Trump-era border policies, increasing Border Patrol agents, and restricting access for asylum seekers. He argues that these measures are reasonable and necessary to address the border crisis and criticizes Democrats for opposing them. He highlights the need for a bipartisan approach to immigration policy and criticizes the Biden administration for its handling of the border crisis. Shapiro highlights the Biden administration's response to the immigration crisis, including blaming systemic factors such as climate change and poverty. He criticizes the administration for refusing to take responsibility and for its lack of action in addressing the border crisis. Shapiro also questions the administration's request for additional funding while spending trillions of dollars on other initiatives. Shapiro discusses the response from Democratic officials, including White House spokesperson Andrew Bates and Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, who defend the administration's handling of the border crisis. He also mentions the impeachment proceedings against Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and the lack of cooperation between Democrats and Republicans in addressing the immigration issue. Shapiro highlights Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's position on the immigration crisis and the supplemental bill, emphasizing the Democrats' refusal to consider adding border security measures to the bill. He questions the Democrats' priorities and their willingness to address the border crisis effectively. Shapiro discusses the current state of the economy, including challenges such as inflation and supply chain bottlenecks. He highlights the impact of inflation on consumer prices and the challenges faced by the Federal Reserve in managing interest rates. Shapiro also discusses the potential for a cooling economy and the impact of labor shortages on hiring and job postings. He criticizes the Biden administration's economic policies and argues that the administration needs to address these challenges to avoid a recession. Shapiro discusses the escalating tensions in the Middle East, including the recent attacks in Iran and the ongoing conflict in Yemen. He highlights the role of Iranian-backed groups in the region and the potential for further destabilization. Shapiro argues that the United States and its allies need to take a strong stance against these groups to prevent further conflict and protect international shipping in the region. He criticizes the Biden administration's approach to the Middle East and calls for a more assertive policy to address the escalating tensions. Shapiro also discusses a piece by Claudine Gay, a Harvard professor, who portrays herself as a victim and talks about the challenges of being Claudine Gay. He criticizes the piece and argues that it does not address the real issues facing the country. He highlights the need for a more substantive discussion of important political and economic issues and criticizes the focus on personal narratives and identity politics.